Yes, Jane. I'll see you. Come in. Have a seat. So you're the newspaper man from New York. Huh. Well, you know what this is, Mr. Newspaper Man? No, it's not just knitting. Well, it's a sweater. For my husband, John Indian. I've been knitting it for the past 13 months. It's how long I've been in this God-forsaken jail. And you know why? 'Cause I can't afford jail fees. That's right, jail fees. You see, here in Salem, Massachusetts, in 1692, guilty or not, anyone who goes to jail gotta pay jail fees. Imagine that. How much am I? £7. Well, I ain't seen John Indian in all of these 13 months, and this sweater, like more over there, is for heat. So I understand you want to tell my story. Yes. I do know 19 people were hanged. And yes, one was pressed to death. And I also read that 200 were charged and 50 were convicted. Yes, Mr. Newspaper Man, I can and do read. And they say it's all because of me. And because of witchcraft. Well, just listen. Because as my grandmother once said, the truth of a story often depends on who does the telling. My name is Tituba. That's T-I-T-U-B-A. It's the name of my tribe, you see. I'm part Arawak and part African. I was born in an Arawak village off the coast of South America. My mother was full-blood Arawak. My father, an Ashanti, an African. My mother said I got my beauty and intellect from her, and my gift of storytelling from my father. I remember well the stories my father used to tell of his fond remembrances of Africa. He was a proud Ashanti. He used to tell of his hunt of the mighty lion alongside his father, or his rompings on the river's edge with his brothers and playmates. He said, until the lions tell their tale, the story of the hunt always glorifies the hunter. Legend has it, when my father was captured and brought from Ghana, that's in Africa, he refused to be anybody's slave. So like others, he ran off into the bush, never to be captured again. He was found by my people and called Bakuma. That means in Arawak, he who struggles. My father was widely admired in the village and in other villages along the Sunset Coast as an expert canoe man. He knew the secrets of the deep. My father was also the only man to travel beyond the lands of the village. Some say he even traveled as far away as St. John in the Danish West Indies. You'll see, my mother's people also have their stories. You remember the legend that we come from a great people to the south, and that when we first came here in our canoes, we first settled on the sunrise side, where the seas were intolerable and life was miserable, and there all things bad happened to us. Until we came around in our canoes to the sunset side, and there we prospered. My mother said my father was never convinced that life on the sunrise side was so bad, until one day, on his return from a long canoe voyage, he ran into the village yelling, "They're coming! They're coming! They're coming now!" My mother said nobody but he knew who they were. He grabbed his machete, and that was the last we saw of him. There, never before seen white faces there, cross in one hand and sword in the other, pillage and ravage the village, capturing my mother and I. The men were killed or left behind. You see, Mr. Newspaper Man, the invading Spaniards were only interested in capturing the girls and women, to sell them into slavery in Barbados as house servants. From the village, they tied us together and herded us like animals onto big boats. I remember that. I don't remember landing in Barbados. But Mama said, with you by my side, they shoved us onto an auction block. Say, what do we get today? What do you say? What can we get? What is here? Wench and a pick-me, with a strong background, but they're too good cheap. Who will give me 50? Do I hear 60 right there? What do we get? What do you say? We were sold to John Thompson slaves. The ride to the Thompson plantation on the back of a rickety buggy over crooked and dusty roads was long and tiring. My mother, who first started getting sick on the long bug trip, started getting sicker. Finally, we came to a hill. In the distance was a windmill. Not far from the windmill rose the great house. It was white, trimmed in green. Trees lined the road to the entrance. Off to the side, there was a cluster of thatched, roofed cabins made of palm fronds. That's where the slaves lived. And died. And because of the evil ways of the planters, among the slaves dying was a constant companion. And those planters were evil. Once, one told Master Thompson, you better watch them slaves. You know, they steal your socks while you sleep, poison your food while you're out. You see, the way I see it, you got two choices, right? You can spoil your niggas. You can keep them in line like I do. Let your niggas know who's boss. Once, my mother and I got to the plantation. We were made house servants. Nana was in charge of all the house servants. She was big and round and stern and funny and black. Like my father, she was an Ashanti. I liked her from the beginning, and she liked me too. That's what she called me, because she had a lisp. Hey, you! Raise yourself! But don't you ever raise your dress for no man! Nana knew Obia too. Or at least a lot about it. Well, you see, Mr. Newspaper Man, white people treated all their slaves the same. So the blacks and the Arawaks mixed in marriage and in spiritual worship. Nana told me that even some of the white planters' women folk doubt in African rituals.
Don't you ever speak to a soul about it. But I know for sure that Mr. Thompson is working Obia. Athena, come in with young girls who are with giants, and they lay here flat as a pancake. And she tell them as they leave, go and avoid the wrath of the devil.
As a young girl, growing up in the plantation, my world was defined by the beliefs, fears, and practices that dealt beyond the world of the feeling and the seeing. Nana told me,
Giant, whatever you think or do here, don't you ever fool around with things you don't understand.
As time went by, my mother's illness grew worse. But she was still forced to work by the Thompsons. Work, work, working like a beast. Work, work, working like a beast. Soon after, she just gave up, collapsed, and died. Nana bent down and cradled her, and with a wail I'd never heard before, cried. I was 8. They say my mother was 28. From then on, everything I learned from Nana. And I learned from watching white people, just as Nana taught me. With my eyes wide open. and I learned well. There came a time when Master Thompson became very ill. Unable to manage his money or his plantation, he got into debt. A man named Samuel Parris came down from Boston, and I was sold as repayment. Before leaving for this new land called Massachusetts, Nana called me to the side.
Look, Davantini Luna. For the last 9 years, you've been like my own. Your mama forced you into this world, and when she left, she passed you on to me. I didn't protect you best I could till now, but I can't protect you any longer. You on your own now. You remember what I told you about men wanting to raid your dress? It's gonna happen. You raid yourself. You come from a long and glorious line of kings and queens, prince and princess. You raise up.
It took all of 3 weeks to get where we were going. This land called Massachusetts. I got sick plenty during the long voyage. I got sick of the same old food and little water day after day. Got sick of being wet on the boat all of the time. But most of all, I got sick of Samuel Parris. He was a little man compared to the few whites I'd seen in Barbados. He had a foul mouth and a foul breath. I'd never been with or wanted to be with a man. Nana had warned me well of that. But Samuel Parris persisted and persisted and persisted. Then one day, it happened. It was about a week into the voyage. It was a cold and rainy night. The seas were angry. Master Parris had sent a shipmate to fetch me to his quarters. I almost fell off the big boat on the way. When I got there, he was sitting in a chair, drunk. I was cold and frightened. He began to ask me a lot of questions, things like, how old are you? Why are you so pretty? How many men you done had? I started getting colder and more frightened. Then he just lunged at me and threw me down on his cot. He began to tear off my dress. I pulled back and I scratched him back, but he kept coming at me. They looked at me real evil and said, "Get the hell out of my sight, wench!" From that day until now, I haven't been able to have any children. It was bitter cold when we landed in the Boston harbor. They called it something I had never heard before. Winter? There were more white faces than I'd ever seen before in my lifetime. Everyone was bundled up in wool clothes and they moved about so fast. The streets were made of red brick and stone. I'd never seen that before either. Everyone moved about in such haste and for no apparent reason, and they called themselves civil, just because they bowed and curtsied when meeting. None of this changed my encounter with Master Parris. Samuel Parris was a well-to-do, respected businessman in Boston. Along with his widowed mother, he lived in a large house on the outskirts of Boston. So this is the wench you got from the Thompsons. I hope she was worth it. From now on, you report to me, Mistress Parris, and to me only. That's the first thing his mother said to me, eyeing me from head to toe. You've probably been my son's concubine. But that's the end of that. I surely don't want no mulattoes running around here. In 3 months, he will be respectfully married. So whatever he did to you, it's over. As much as you probably liked it. For your sexual rompings, I bought John Indian for you. He will be your husband. And so that's how I became married. I asked John Indian what concubine meant. And he told me it was a white man's way of feeling good by inflicting pain. Oh, but John Indian, he was a good man. He was full-blood Indian, and like me, he was repayment for a debt owed the Parrises. But unlike me, he couldn't read, and I could. Well, I first learned in Barbados. Nana had gave me a Bible. So when the Thompsons would take me with them to church to serve the tea afterwards, I listened to how they told their stories from the Bible. Soon after, I began to be able to put words to the stories and make it make sense and read. Ain't but 2 people before now who knew I could read. Nana and John Indian. And now you. After John Indian and I got together, things began to settle in. Master Parris got married, and his new wife bore him 2 children, 2 years apart, both girls. But as Parris prospered, he started getting bored. So after 7 years, he decided to become a minister. Well, you see, Mr. Newspaper Man, it was proper for a man of means to become a preacher, and Samuel Parris had been to Harvard. But few congregations wanted Samuel Parris.
We respectfully reject your services. Do they not know of my worthiness? Look at what I've built. Look at the wealth I've amassed. Am I not one of the grandchildren of the founding fathers? Have I not treated my slaves well? What is this? Madness!
Not once did Parris call the name of the Almighty God or his ability to serve him. Finally, a small church in nearby Salem made him an offer. And leaving Boston and the widowed Parris behind, we all moved to Salem. Among my new house duties, I was now assigned the task of caring for the young Parris daughters, Amy and Priscilla. Growing up, they were the typical young white girls conditioned by their puritanical society. They played with dolls, experimented with cooking, and read the Bible. But most of all, they were curious about me, always asking questions.
Tituba! Are you really, Indian?
No, I'm an Arawak. Indian is the nonsense Columbus called us because he got lost on his way from Spain to India.
Tituba, where's the country called Africa, and why isn't it mentioned in the Bible?
Because Africa is a continent, and it is mentioned in the Bible 41 times as Ethiopia, and Ethiopia is a country, and the people who rewrote the Bible were not Africans.
Tituba, why haven't the Inti children?
The answer to that question, they didn't really need to know. You know, Mr. Newspaper Man, white people don't really understand nor do they want to understand the ways and customs of people different from them. Why? Well, you can answer that better than I. But in my view, it is a combination of fear and ignorance. You know, Mr. Newspaper Man, music and dance have always been a part of our religious ceremonies. Drums and all kinds of percussive instruments have always been a staple of our beliefs that we almost always practice at night because we worked all day. And our religious beliefs are closely tied to curing the sick, you see. What you call magic, they call black magic. Bull. Two of Amy and Priscilla's closest friends were Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne. They were the Parris' next-door neighbors. With no boys around to play with or be bothered by, they mostly kept to themselves. But sometimes they would sneak up on me while I was cooking. The whole lot of them.
Tituba! Comb my hair. Tie my shirt. Wash my hands. Fetch me a cookie. Pass me a glass. Find me a door. Do it yourself!
I yelled as they scattered. I knew my time would come to fix them good. And it did. It's about 6 months later. Saturday afternoon. John Indian had gone into town to fetch some supplies. Master Parris was at the parsonage preparing a sermon. Mistress Parris was at the millinery shop having a dress made. Her neighbors, the mothers Good and Osborne, accompanied her. The 4 girls were left with me: Amy, Priscilla, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne. I was in the parlor knitting, minding my own business, when the 4 of them sheepishly strolled in.
Tituba, Sarah Good says you're not a real Indian. I did not. She did so, right, Prissy? All I said was, how's she able to peruse it, right, Priscilla?
First of all, I am not an Indian. I'm an Arawak, and my father was an African. And I can prove it. Come close. I took the knitting needle, and without them seeing, began rubbing it up against my wool sweater. Then I held it up to the knitting thread, and I said, "Watch." And slowly, ever so slowly, the thread started moving closer to the needle. The girls watched in amazement and thought it was magical. I can cure the sick, make the blind see. I can make animals talk and demons walk. Now do you haunted me. But soon after, isolated cases of fever began popping up all over Salem. You see, Mr. Newspaper Man, Puritans don't put much faith in medicine as a cure. Puritans believe that prayer is the ultimate cure, and if prayer don't work, then they say that the evil hand is at work. Or witchcraft.
Tituba, come quick! Poor Sarah has fallen ill with fever. The girls said they saw you do magic. Come quick and find out who bewitched my little Sarah.
So I went. And when I got there, she looked bad, real bad. But I had no idea what they wanted or expected from me. So I agreed to prepare a witch cake. They fetched me some raw meat, a spoonful of the girl's urine, and some ashes, and we mixed it together, and we fed it to their dog, and I told them that dog would reveal the name of that witch. But it was too late. Poor little Sarah died that night. The next day, Master Parris asked me,
Tituba! Tell me now, what do you know about witches? You see, there's a lot of talk in town about poor little Sarah being bewitched. See me, I'm a man old, and I will not tolerate such blasphemy. You see, my reputation is at stake. You keep your distance from our ladies. You keep little Amy and Priscilla themselves here. Witches!
And no matter how much I denied it, the prevailing view was that I must know something. Everywhere I went, I was hounded and scowled at.
The witch! You are go back to Africa! Yeah, we're gonna get you! You evil devil! Bitch! See, look here now. We know you're just the innocent pawn in all this. Sure, to tell us who else was involved, and we may let you go. Time to spend time you're studying in now. Just tell us the truth.
And so, having no choice, and remembering what my mother told me about my storytelling gift, I began telling them what they wanted to hear. We would meet at night, you see, late, when everyone was sleeping. We would go deep into the bush. We would be led by a man. I know, but that's just a myth, you see. Many men would accompany us. Our interests were to recruit young girls and make them witches in training. There would be drums and dancing, lots of dancing, almost to a frenzy, you see. We would sing and chant and seek out the living dead. Sometimes we'd bring little animals and they would begin to talk. Next thing I knew, people were being dragged from their homes, spit upon, pressed to death, and hanged. The hysteria became so widespread that even the governor's wife was accused of being a witch. At this point, sanity began to take over, and most people realized that witchcraft was not the culprit. But I remained here in jail. And that's my story, Mr. Newspaper Man. What? What's this? £7 for my jail fees. Well, thank you, Mr. Newspaper Man.
Thank you for coming out. My name is Clarence R. Cuthbertson. I wrote this play, I directed this play, and I played all the musical instruments that you heard. So give me my props. First of all, I want to thank the National Black Theater for hosting us tonight. And I also want to thank my family, my Cuthbertson posse who's here, all of you for coming. And I want to give you a little bit of the backstory about this play, and then we're going to ask you 3 questions, and we have some gifts to give you if you answer the questions correctly. When I was younger, during my golden years, I was raised a lot by my grandmother and my grandfather. My brothers and sisters here, they can tell you about that. Anyway, my grandfather once asked me, he said, "What are you going to be when you grow up?" I said, "I want to be a writer." He said, "Well, if you become a writer, you need to get that story that Arthur Miller is telling in The Crucible about this woman named Tituba." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because there's no such name as Tituba in the Eastern Caribbean lexicon." He was right. I said, "Okay." I said, "What must I do?" He said, "You got to follow that name, Tituba." I said, "Yeah, okay." Yeah. 12 years old. Yeah, okay. So later on, when I was studying playwriting, I had to read The Crucible. And I came across his name, Tituba. And I said, wait a minute, that's the same name my grandfather was talking about. So I went to the Schomburg Library right here on 135th Street, started doing some research. And then I went down to Barbados, started doing some research. And what I found out, that Tituba, I started thinking, wait a minute, she was a slave, she was sold by somebody. And I realized that she was sold. She was sold by the Spaniards to the Thompsons. And I actually found the records of the slave records where she was sold, and it said Tituba. And I realized that, or I found out that her and her mother were from a group which was an offshoot of the Arawaks called the Tituban tribe from South America in a place called the Orinoco River Basin that runs north and south of South America. And what I found out was when she and her mother were captured, her mother told her, "Do never tell them your name." So when she was captured, they said, "Who are you?" She said, "I'm a Tituban." And that's the name that stuck through history. And again, it's on the bill of sale from the Spaniards, the Thompson, okay, Tituba. So right there, Arthur Miller had it wrong because he said she was from Barbados, okay? Secondly, Arthur Miller in his book, in his play The Crucible, said she was matronly, which means she was old. And in fact, the two women who played her in the film were Cicely Tyson and Ruby Dee, both of whom were in their 60s when they played her. Tituba was in her 20s when all of this happened. So again, he was wrong, okay? He also said, and this is based on a lot from Quakers in Salem, that she was exotic because she was a slave, an African. Well, the only image they had of Africa or African was of like people like Kinta Kunte from Roots, you know. So when they saw somebody like her, they said, "Ooh, she's exotic." She wasn't exotic. She was an Arawak and an Ashanti. But she did have some traits. She was considered an herbalist. And one reason why is because she had a garden in front of her house. And when all the other gardens failed, hers was the only one that survived. Okay? I used to teach at Yale. And one time we did this play, my ex-wife, who originated this role, in fact. My brother and sister know who she is. We went up to Yale to do it. There was a group of black student government members. They had a conference up in Yale. And they asked me to do this play, Tituba. And Arthur Miller was in the audience, but he didn't stay for the Q&A. He left. But I later saw him at a talk back at the Yale Drama School. And after this talk, he called me up and he said, "Hey, you're the guy who wrote that play, right? About Tituba?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, that was a remarkable play. Where did you get your information?" I said, "Where did you get yours?" And he said, "I got mine from the trial transcripts and from the newspaper accounts." Well, the trial transcripts and the newspaper were all biased against Tituba because they were looking for a scapegoat. Because she was the one who said she did it, and she was a witch, and she was a witch. These are all lies. But that's where he got his information. I said, "No, that wasn't the story." He said, "Well, you know, I didn't write that story. It was a love story. The witch hunt was just a backstory." He said, "It was really about the love story." I said, "Okay." He said, "The reason I wrote the play was because I was trying to show the intolerance of Salem in 1672 and the intolerance of 1952 during the McCarthy era in the House Un-American Activities Committee. When I was called a communist." He said, "That's what I was trying to show." He said, "So what we got to do as playwrights and as writers, we got to end intolerance. We got to stop what the Nazis said. We got to stop what's happening in South Africa. We got to stop what the rednecks are doing in the South." And I said, "You're absolutely right." In fact, where I taught at Yale, we taught the Yale had bought the synagogue where Arthur Miller and Marilyn Monroe had got married. And when we would go over to my classroom, it was in a tower. You see all these pictures of him and Marilyn Monroe. I said, "Okay, that's cool." But more importantly, over the last 15 years as a playwright, what I've been doing is writing about heroes and sheroes who emerged from the African diaspora, who have been marginalized in the writing of history, and Tituba is one of them. I also wrote a play about Toussaint Louverture, and about Nat Turner, and about Queen Mary from St. Croix, and Nettie Myra from St. John, who was the first person to receive a degree from NYU in nursing, and went on to become a notorious midwife, probably the most famous midwives of the Virgin Islands. But even she is marginalized. Okay? So, and right now, well, not right now, just finished a play about Adam Clayton Powell, who's probably the most powerful politician, black or white, in the 20th century. This man created 48 pieces of legislation that passed, okay, more than any other congressman or senator in the history of America. But in the eyes of white people, he's marginalized. In fact, he's demonized because of what he stood for. And what he stood for was blackness, okay? Regardless of what he was as a man, he was about being black, okay? So I have a play now. As a matter of fact, I shared it with Napi. I said, look, hey, we want to do this at some point. Adam Clayton Powell. So that's what I've been doing.